me under, take me under your wing. Call the shots, bring it back to what it's
Well, God the Father is like a master carpenter, and as portrayed there, he repurposes all of the broken pieces of our lives, including our wounds. Before I get started, let me encourage all of you who are available and can take a second look at Night to Shine. We need a few more buddies, that is, a person who will shadow an individual in a family with developmental disabilities. This big prom night is going to be fun for them and for you. And so if you are available, would you sign up as a buddy so we can close that gap? Well, I have to report to you that this week, concerning my chips and my skins and my candy and Coke, A minus. If that's all the encouragement I'm going to get, I'm going to relapse tomorrow. The first week, I had a B minus minus because I didn't want to give myself a C. The second week, a legitimate B minus. And this week, an A minus. And look, if I didn't have, thank y'all, all right. If I didn't have you to pressure me, I wouldn't say pressure, incentivize me, that I knew I had to come each week and report to you. I'm looking at those skins, then I say, no, I've got to give my report to the church. So, you help me, you incentivize me to do better. Now, those who study the brain says it takes about 2 months for the brain to know you're serious. In about 3 weeks, it begins to get clues. But in 2 months, it knows you're serious. And so my challenge has been to you for 2 months, repurpose some area in your life. Do it for 2 months. Mine was chips and Coke and candy and skins, to eat 50% less. And do it for 2 months. Don't try to say the whole year, just do it for 2 months. If you do it after 2 months and you don't like how you feel, then go back to what you were doing. But I hope it becomes a discipline as it is becoming for me. We continue our series on repurposing. On last week, Eli taught us how to repurpose our tendency to isolate and move to connection, particularly connection in a smaller community group. Like me, you may not have this issue, but I have a tendency to isolate myself. And he challenged us to put a few more friends around us and connect with them. They help us in so many ways. It's the way God intended. Well, this week I want to focus on woundedness, our wounds, moving from woundedness toward wholeness. If you've lived for any length of time, then you have experienced the wounds of life. Some of you may be experiencing a wound even now, brokenness, going through adversity and suffering, back against the wall, at your wit's end. Well, God has a way of moving us from wounds to wholeness. And I want to give a running exposition in this story that I love, John chapter 9, because it gives us some clues as to what God is up to with the wounds in our lives. So regarding woundedness, this is what we can learn. John chapter 9, 1 through 3. While walking along the road, Jesus saw a man who was blind since birth. His disciples said, "Teacher, who sinned? Who is responsible for this man's blindness? Did he commit sins that merited this punishment? If not his sins, is it the sins of his parents?" Jesus answered, "Neither." Here's the first thing that we learn. Jesus corrected the wrong rationale of his disciples, and he corrects our wrong rationale as well. We as humans have a tendency to misjudge people when they're going through their wounded times. Like the disciples in the ancient world, it was just natural for them to say, "Who did sin? Was it this man or his parents?" Jesus said, "Neither." Many of the wounds that we suffer are not because of individual sin and not even because of generational sin. The wounds that we suffer in life, many of them are simply because that we live in a fallen human world. We have a fallen human condition. When our foreparents, Adam and Eve, decided to walk independent of God, sin entered, invaded the world, and death came as a result. God always intended for us to live forever, but sin has caused death, and before death, there are a lot of wounds and brokenness that happen psychologically and physiologically in order for us to go back to the dust. It's a result of the fallen human condition. But if we're not careful, we'll look at a person, what they're going through, or even ourselves and say, "What did I do? Was it my sin or the sins of my parents or some other person?" Jesus says, "Neither." For many of our wounds, it has nothing to do with that. I was born a brittle asthmatic. I've told you that on several occasions. First 10 years of my life, there was not a month to go by that I was not in the hospital. In those days, they didn't have portable breathing treatments as they do today. When I had an asthmatic attack, I was rushed to the hospital to lie under an oxygen tank to try to regain my breath. I didn't ask for it, and my parents didn't want to give it to me. It was genetic. It has nothing to do with my sin or her sin or my father's sin. It's a matter of being in a fallen human condition. And then I passed it on to my favorite oldest daughter. She had nothing to do with it. I didn't mean to do it, but she also suffered asthmatic attacks for a long time. So Jesus corrects the wrong rationale of who did sin. Here's the second thing he did. He not only corrected the wrong rationale, but he then goes on to clarify one major reason that God allows wounds or woundedness. He clarified this, and he said, "His blindness cannot be explained or traced to any particular person's sins. He is blind so that the deeds of God may be put on display." Deeds and display of God. It's glory in some translations. In fact, in the original Greek, it's so that God can be glorified, which sounds kind of strange to us, but it'll make sense perhaps in a minute. Jesus says, "While it is daytime, we must do the works of the one who sent me. But when the sun sets and night falls, the work is impossible. Whenever I'm in the world, I am the light of the world." In other words, Jesus says the works of God being put on display has to be done while it's day, while I'm alive. Day here means while I'm living, while there's blood in my veins, breath in my body, I display the works of God. Because when night comes, nighttime, when I die, I cannot display the works of God. So I got to get busy right now in this period that I'm on earth displaying the works of God. This man was born blind, not because of his sin or his parents' sin. It had nothing to do with individual or generational sin. Some of our wounds and brokenness, suffering, adversity has everything to do with God wants to put us on display so that his works can be seen by other people. Now, I know I don't like that, and you may not like that, but that's what Jesus taught us. He clarifies one of the reasons that God gives us, allows these wounds in our lives, so that the deeds of God, the works of God can be put on display. The modern word for display or glory is publicize. God wants me and you through our wounds to publicize him or commercialize him or to be a walking billboard for him. How many of you have seen commercials? I dare say you can't even look at television without seeing commercials. For every 30-minute television show, there are 8 minutes of commercials. Count them next time you watch. 8 minutes of commercials. I can't even get on social media. I'm trying to look up something on the internet, and I'm interrupted because somebody is publicizing something else that I really have no interest in. So the word glory or display means to publicize. It means to commercialize. It means to be a walking billboard. God actually put this blind man in the way so that he would be a publication, a commercial for his deeds. And he does that with us as well. I was at a movie the other week, started at 7 o'clock. I had to endure 13 minutes of commercials. 13 minutes. And it's pretty much that way all the time. I didn't come to see those commercials. I came to see the movie. But I couldn't even get to the movie without publicizing other stuff. And you know what? I sat through that. And then I saw something. I said, I'm going to go see that. Because it works. Even though I had no interest in it. God clarifies one of the reasons he really puts us on public display so that we can show, publicize, commercialize the deeds that he's doing in our lives. So Jesus saw this man, and as he said these things, he spat on the ground, he mixed saliva and dirt to form mud, which he smeared across the blind man's eyes. And he said to the blind man, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam." Now, Siloam means sent, and its name reminded us that his healing was sent by God. So the man went and washed and returned to Jesus, his eyes now alive with sight. Then neighbors and others who knew him were confused to see a man so closely resembling the blind beggar who was now running about. And as he was running about, the townspeople said, "Is this the man that we see every day sitting and begging in the streets?" And others said, "This is the same man." And still others says, "This cannot be him, but this fellow bears an uncanny resemblance to the blind man." And finally the blind man spoke up and said, "I'm the same man. It's me. It's me." He corrects the wrong rationale. He clarifies the reason. Now, isn't it wonderful? Somebody reminded me that God put this man in the Word of God so that millennia after millennia, people would know his story and the works of God can be displayed over and over and over again. So now the man is healed. And here's the third thing Jesus points out. The man is healed. Our wounds shift the focus from the minor to the major. Our wounds have a way of shifting our focus from minor things to the major things that matter, from the trivia to that which is significant. Because as we learned in this story, these religious leaders and Pharisees and even the disciples were more concerned about when the man was healed than that he was healed. They should have been marveling over what God had done. They were concerned about when he did it, because it was done on the Sabbath day. And you're not supposed to do any work, they said, on the Sabbath day. The fact that Jesus did work, he interfaced with this man, and this man was sent to a pool, and he had to walk to it. That was work. Petty. Here's how it goes. They said to him, "How has your lifeless eyes been opened?" The formerly blind man said, "Well, a man named Jesus approached me, and he made mud out of the ground and applied it to my eyes, and he said to me, 'Go, wash yourself in the pool of Siloam.' I went and washed, and suddenly I could see." And they said, "Well, where is this man who healed you?" And he said, "I don't know." The townspeople brought the formerly blind beggar to appear before the Pharisees. That same day Jesus healed him, which happened to be on the Sabbath day. Petty. The Pharisees then began questioning him, looking for some explanation for how he could see. And the blind man said, "Well, he speared mud on my eyes, and I washed, and now I see." I kind of told you that before. And they said, "Well, God couldn't possibly be with this man because he is breaking the rules on the..." More concerned about when than what. How can such a law-breaking scoundrel do something like this? The Pharisees were at odds one with the other about Jesus and could not agree on whether his power came from God or the devil. Petty. Trivia. But here's what God does with my wounds and yours. He shifts the conversation from what's minor to what's major and begin to raise consciousness about who he really is. I want to introduce to you a friend of mine. Joel Ossopp has come, Mr. Joel Ossopp. I want him to come for a minute, and Joel will introduce himself. Let's give him a hearty hope welcome. Something must be wrong with the microphone system. We're at Hope. Let's give him a hearty hope welcome. That's better. All right.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for letting me come and share my story today about how God has really worked in my life and touched my life and helped me see through my own wounds what life can be like. So I'm not originally from Memphis. I'm originally from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And when I was 7 years old, back in 1987, I was a right-handed kid. And right around Christmas time, my parents started noticing, as a right-handed child, I stopped using my right hand to do things. Simple things like getting dressed or eating a meal. And so luckily they were very observant parents, because frankly I tried to hide it from them. I thought I'd done something wrong or stupid to hurt myself. So they took me to our pediatrician. They did an x-ray there, and our pediatrician could see something on that x-ray. He said, "I don't want to alarm you yet, but let's go get a second opinion and a better image." So he sent us to our local children's hospital. And there they ran an MRI. And from that scan, the doctor there could see exactly what was going on. There was a tumor growing in my right arm near my shoulder that had actually broken a bone in my arm. And that's why I was in pain and stopped using my right hand. Here's the first part where you could see, even though, despite this wound, that God was working in our lives. The tumor was still localized to the bone, so it had broken it in time for us to have a good treatment outcome. Another stroke of seeing God work in our lives is that the doctor who looked at that scan had done his fellowship here at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. So when he looked at that scan, he could see very clearly, like I said, what was going on. He told my parents it's probably going to be an osteosarcoma, which is the most common form of pediatric bone cancer. And what that means is you're going to need about a year worth of treatment. You're probably going to have a major surgery. But I worked at a place in Memphis called St. Jude where you guys will get the best care and have the best protocol for this disease. So this is literally 2 days before Christmas when we get this news. And we just put our faith in this doctor that he knew what he was talking about, that St. Jude is where we needed to go. Fortunately for us, we got to stay at home for Christmas, but 2 days after Christmas, Me and my mom and dad and my little brother, who was only 4, and little sister, who was only 1, got in our family van and made the journey to Memphis, Tennessee, not knowing what to expect. We had good health insurance because my parents had good jobs, but they were terrified it was not the kind of insurance that was going to pay for a year worth of treatment and a major surgery and pay for housing while we're here. But as many of you know about St. Jude, when we got here, we didn't have to worry about that. This is a place that pays for everything so families can focus on helping their child live. So that was the first mercy that we received when we got to Memphis, Tennessee. Our doctor in Chattanooga turned out to be absolutely right. The tumor was officially diagnosed as osteosarcoma, and I began what would be about a year worth of treatment. About 4 months into my treatment with chemotherapy, the decision was made that they needed to amputate my right arm. And that was just given the placement of the tumor. It was not in a spot where limb sparing was an option at the time. That's something we've changed drastically. Now, in 95% of the cases where tumors are like mine, they're isolated to the bone, we can save the limb. We've come so far in that regard. It sounds funny to say, but hearing that news as a 7-year-old that I was going to lose my right arm, my dominant hand, didn't make me that scared. I knew that I was going to be okay. I handled it much better as a child than I probably would have now. There are a couple of reasons for that, because children, I think, are resilient and brave. The other reason is I could tell you, even though I'd attempted many sports before I lost the right arm, I had no God-given a talent or ability that was going to be taken away from me by losing my right hand. It was not, these guitars back there would do me just as good in one hand as they would have in 2 hands. Nothing was going to happen with the second hand that I didn't need, and that was a grace and a kindness that God had already put in my heart. And so after my amputation, I had about another 7 months worth of treatment left at St. Jude. And as soon as I woke up from the anesthesia after that amputation, I was met with love and kindness. And people not only at St. Jude, but throughout the community and back in my hometown asking me, what do you want to do? We're going to figure this out together. So I was able to figure it out so much with my physicians, with my physical therapist at St. Jude, that by the time I ended my treatment in November of 1988, I was able to go back to a normal life. I was ready to hop right back into 3rd grade because I'd had a homebound teacher provided for me. I was ready to hop right back into attempting to play sports with my friends, and I didn't take the easy route. I decided I wanted to play baseball with one hand, and I played center field and first base. I wasn't the kid who sat in right field and ate grass and threw dirt around. I was actually part of the team. So I played baseball for several seasons. I started playing intramural basketball in middle school and high school and through college. I actually played in the league here at Hope Presbyterian. And then, I've played golf for several years. And in the last 5 years, I've picked up triathlons. Actually, 8 months ago, I finished my very first half Ironman. So really had, thank you. I've really had just such an amazing life ever since my life was saved 28 years ago from childhood cancer. And for the last, I guess it's been 14 years ago, that I came back to work for St. Jude, to work for ALSAC, the fundraising and awareness organization for St. Jude. And I realize, ironically enough, we're talking about advertisements. I make commercials. That's what I do. That's my job. But it's a great job, and it's great commercials because they're little stories. I get to share the stories of our families who walk through the doors of St. Jude without a chance of hope. But I get to talk to them and learn about them and give that story to the world. And there's a truth that I've come to, guys, over the last 14 years of talking to these families and getting to know them, is there can be anger, there can be sadness, but when I talk to every family who comes through those doors, there's absolutely no bitterness. They are wounded, they are scared, but there's nothing bitter that comes off from them, especially when I interview them. And that's become a truth for me as well. When I was a kid, I struggled with the fact that I got cancer. Why did this happen to me? Did I do something to deserve this? And I've realized that, no, I didn't do anything to deserve this. This has actually given me so much. From my woundedness, guys, what I can give to you now is my absolute ultimate truth. So someone could come to me today. They could say, you could go back in time, have never had cancer, have never lost your right arm, but it would mean you wouldn't know about St. Jude. You wouldn't be in Memphis. You wouldn't be here on the stage today. Would you do it? Absolutely not. An arm is a small price to pay for what I have. I get to live in a community that is the most loving and giving community that I can imagine in the world. I get to work for a place where I'm just a simple video producer, but I work with some of the greatest minds in the world who are working to unlock the genetic factors that cause so many diseases, and we share that worldwide because our compassion and caring knows no bounds. I get to have a girlfriend who's helped me deepen my relationship with God and has helped me understand love and grace and mercy in life unlike I've ever known. So guys, those are all the gifts I've been given from woundedness. So when you think about the wounds you have, understand that though they may hurt, they might be leading you to where you're supposed to be. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, brother. An arm is a small price to pay. Now, some of you can lift transcripts from your own life, or you've been thinking about the wounds and brokenness you've suffered, and could say something like Joe said today. Because that's what God can do, to move our wounds to wholeness. Here is a fourth thing. Our wounds cause us to see life through different eyes. They cause us to see life through different eyes. And the Pharisees called on him, this man, a second time. They said, well, now you give God the credit. He's the one who healed you. All glory belongs to God. We are persuaded this man you speak of is a sinner who defies God. And the formerly blind man said, if this man is a sinner, I don't know. I'm not qualified to say. I only know one thing. I love this. I was blind, but now you can call him what you want. But you walked by me all these years. You never did anything for me. You couldn't. All I know is when I met him, I was blind. But now I see. Wounds cause us to see life through a different set of eyes. Some of you can say that's true today. And then here's the last one. Our wounds confirm and strengthen our faith and the plan that God has for our lives. Wounds have a way of confirming our faith and strengthening us for the plan that God has for our lives. I'm going to make this major point. Don't lose me. Jesus heard what had happened, and he sought out the man. Now, I could preach another 30 minutes on that. I said Jesus heard how this man was being harassed, and he sought out the man and said, do you believe in the Son of Man? The formerly blind man said, I want to believe, Lord, but who is he? Jesus said, you have seen his face with your new eyes, and you are now talking to him. Lord, I believe. And the man bowed low to worship Jesus. Let me clear up a myth. Jesus healed indiscriminately. He did not predicate healing based on if you believed in him or not. That's not the kind of God we serve. He didn't hold a person hostage and say, I'm going to do this for you if you believe in me, and if you don't, then I'm not. He healed indiscriminately. This man did not even know that Jesus was the Savior of the world. So he said to him, you tell me who he is, and I will believe in the Messiah. Jesus said, well, the one that you can see with your new eyes is the one that you're talking to right now. And he bowed low and worshiped him. Sometimes God uses your woundedness so people can see life through a different set of eyes, and it confirms not only your faith, but their faith, and strengthens them for the plan God has for their life. Listen, let me close with this. If you're in worship and you see someone sitting and crying, don't look at them odd. Because if you only knew the wounds that God had brought them through, you might sit and cry too. If you're in worship and you see someone lift their hands or their hand, don't look at them odd. Because if you only knew the wounds that God had brought them through, you might lift your hand too. If you see someone in worship standing on their feet while others remain seated seated, don't look at them odd. Because if you only knew the wounds that God had brought them through or bringing them through, you might decide to stand up too. I love the old Negro spiritual called By and By. The words say trials are dark on every hand, and we cannot understand all the ways that God would lead us to that blessed promised land, but he will guide us with his eye, and we'll follow until we die, and we'll understand it better, not now, but by and by. Oh, by and by, when the morning comes, when all the saints of God gather home, we then will tell the story how we overcome, and we'll understand it better, not now, but by and by. I didn't appreciate that when I was younger, but as I have lived life and been wounded and broken, I rely on that truth more and more. In fact, I'm going to sing it. This is our benediction. This is my prayer. I won't pray today. This is our prayer in song. I see more kids out here. Listen, when it comes to singing, I'm like a prisoner behind bars searching for a key. You might not find me. That's okay if you don't find me. I'll just sing it a cappella. Trials dark on every hand, and we cannot understand all the way that God will lead us to that blessed promised land. He will guide us with his eye, and we'll follow until we die, and we'll understand it better by and by. Oh, by and by, when the morning comes, when all the saints of God gather home, we will tell the story how we overcome, and we'll understand it better by and by. Let me do the second verse. Here temptations and hidden snares often take us unawares, and our hearts are made to bleed by a thoughtless word or deed. And we wonder why the test when we try to do our best, but we'll understand it better by and by. Oh, by and by, Lord, when the morning comes, when all the saints of God gather home, we will tell the story how we overcome, and we'll understand it better, and we'll understand it better, and we'll understand it better, and we'll understand it better by and by. Oh, yeah. Oh, don't get me started here today. Now unto him who is able to keep us even in our woundedness, to the only wise God our Savior. And everyone who agreed said,